I was recording.
Okay, fan is off.
I'm recording, so hold on a second. All right, still recording. So there's just 39 seconds of stuff.
Okay, that's fine. 1, 2.
3, 4.
Okay. All right, this is 212 Ramifications. Nice pun in the title.
Ramifications.
Just Ramifications. Because
Assuming, obviously, this is from the Poison Room.
I guess we'll never have the Poison Room again. Yeah, so I may as well.
Maybe never have the Poison Room again. Who the fuck knows?
Well, I mean, yeah, who knows, but probably.
I mean, it came in, it fridged a girl, and you know. Or something. I'm not entirely sure what happened.
In order to actually fridge someone, we have to care about them at all.
No, you don't. That's absolutely not true. That is
okay. Someone else has to care about them at all. And
yeah, that's legit. Yeah, I would say that is so not true. It is funny. In fact, the definition of fridging is characters that are clearly brought in that you don't ever care about, but only the characters do, and then die.
But she wasn't. So she wasn't fridged because like her death means nothing to the story.
I don't actually know I don't know what to describe. Like I think they made up a new version of this. I don't know what to describe it as.
It's just being shitty to characters. Like they brought her in for like as a plot device and then killed her off when she was no longer useful, and that happened to be like an episode.
No, she was a double plot device.
She was a plot device and an exposition device.
Yeah, she told us that there was a great gap in stuff because maybe they're doing a setup of who knows. But yeah, I guess you do the Poison Room. All right.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to the Life in the Kraken podcast, Fillory edition. Your dose of the magicians deep within the Poison Room. I'm your host, David Robertson, editor-in-chief of We've Always Lived in the Kraken blog. And joining me as always from the Austin office is managing editor of the same blog, Josh Kayusewicz.
The Poison Room sounds like kind of a punk cafe. I would go to that restaurant and then not eat anything.
No, I mean I think that could be a really good restaurant. You know, I'd probably score really high on Yelp.
Yeah.
You know, it'd fit really well. Seems like a really nice hipster area. No one will really know about. You know, people who could survive. You know, you wonder how they actually got so many star ratings, but you know, maybe it's high because the corpses are used to, like, you use the digits to give a rating before you get rid of the corpses.
But think of the opportunity is like you could do like Russian roulette appetizers. I feel like this has a lot of potential.
Yeah, there you go. So we are going to be continue to be talking about season 2 of The Magicians. This is episode 12, Ramifications.
Ramifications. Get it.
I guess I'll just go ahead and can say it now that I think we may have an episode that both Josh and I actually liked. But you know, there's still plenty to yell at, so don't get your hopes too much, people. But I guess Josh insists he has to do a recap because so much happened. So I suppose I'll let it go.
A lot happened. Okay, well, let's get into it, and I'll read it in the like zero punctuation style with no breathing or pauses. And with Mayakovsky's help, Quentin and Julie are able to summon Alice's Nif and restore Alice's shade and thereby bring her back to life. Alice is not happy about this. And Fillory, with Elliot banished and Margot in the fairy realm and Quentin back on Earth, Josh defaults to High King and tries to rule all gangster style, smoking pot and living by Hakuna Matata. This goes poorly for him when Princess and the Lorians attack. He decides to go to the fairy realm to retrieve Margot. Meanwhile, upset after Reynard murdered his wife, the senator mind controls Katie into virtually murdering him to gain his power, which Julie puts into one god-killing bullet. After Penny and Sylvia retrieve the Arsicidium from the librarian's poison room, Sylvia is killed in the process, but not before warning of some great calamity coming in the next few weeks. Penny gets radiation sickness basically. Quentin helps Elliot search for the first portal back to Fillory, the clock the Chatwins crawl through, and trace the object to its owner, collector who turns out to be Umber, the law and order loving god to Ember's chaos. He lets them have the clock so they can return to Fillory and fight Ember. Julie and Katie set a trap for Reynard before Julie can shoot him. Persephone appears revealed to be Reynard's mother. She begs Julie for mercy. Julie lets Reynard live, and Persephone rewards her with her shade. Katie is pissed.
Yeah, so really nothing actually happened.
It was more of a table setting episode, really. I guess not much happened. It's all tables all the way down, really.
They did. I did enjoy them mentioning. Speaking of things all the way down, I definitely enjoyed Umber having a questionnaire and asking how much they like turtles.
Yeah, that was pretty good. That
How
was.
much they
I
like.
think that was. Do you think that was a deliberate Discworld reference?
I mean, yeah, but Fillory itself is also made of turtles. Like they
Oh,
said
is it
that.
also turtle? I've forgotten.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it also is made. It's like that quote is everything uses that Discworld thing, but I'm almost positive there actually is a moment where they mention that in the books.
Okay.
Where
I, I
Fillory is.
enjoyed. I enjoyed his Cube World. I would go enjoy a Cube World or Cuba as it's called.
I'm actually wondering if his cube world is supposed to be the new world from book 2 that they talk about.
Possibly. I thought the book 2 world was like on the backside of like the flat Fillory world. Or am I
Well,
crazy?
what it is like the end of the Fillory world. You can keep going, and there's another world, which I guess makes it kind of. It's unclear. It may be part of Fillory.
But didn't she take like a ladder down, or am I remembering
Yeah,
something
yeah.
else?
They like go down. And it's to a new world, and they're like, you can't. It's supposed to not come back. But it is, I think, somewhat connected, and it's unclear. It's kind of look. They don't really do much more with it, other than like certain people who may or may not go there come back, and the end of the book, the entire series may or may not be about exploring part of it or not exploring it. It's unclear.
Did you enjoy the part where he was like, "What do you like about Fillory?" And they were like, because Fillory sucks." And then it took them a second for Quentin to be like, "But when I was growing up, I had so much hope." And then Elliot is like, "I'm high all the time there," and then that was it.
Well, no, hold on. Elliot gave like a real reason. Quentin's though I was laughing at because I was like, Quentin, you don't like this world at all. Don't even try. Just stop.
Yeah.
Like just stop right now. And here's the thing: I can't tell. They did hesitate. I'm still, even with that said, I'm still not sure if they actually were like. I'm still not sure if like they were actually like that was just, if that was like deliberate, like a joke, or like they were like, well, and then they gave real reasons. We're supposed to believe that Quentin thinks this still, and I'm like, Quentin.
I think we're supposed to believe it, but it's just not in the damn show.
Okay, that's what I wasn't sure of because that's what I'm saying. I think we're supposed to believe it, but no, it's not there.
No, I mean like the answer Quentin gives is like the defining like one sentence like thing of his character. Like the most Quentin-y thing about him is how he feels about Fillory. So that the writers like knew that that's what he should say to that question, but it's just not in the damn show.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said. Elliot's stuff actually was roughly correct. Like he actually believes most of it, which is fine. But it
No,
was just kind of
Elliot's is good, and Elliot like the part at the end where they're like ready to go take back Fillory. Where the part, I mean, I really liked Elliot in that scene, in the scene with Umber because he has just like to me like that's a really good payoff of like all the stuff that he's been through this season, where he's like, yeah, I've been through hell, and I was forced to stay there. But now that I'm out and I have people that I care about and I have this kingdom that I've been trying to take care of, he's like, no, this is my kingdom. I'm the High King, and I'm gonna fight for this land and not just discard it because there's some other land. Like it's not gonna be season 3 in Cube Land for him. Like he's like, no, this is my ground and I'm gonna stand it. And I really liked how Umber like gave him back that respect by just calling him Your Majesty.
yeah. I mean, I like that. How did you feel? How did you feel? I guess this version of Umber, since presumably this means they've removed the like weird. Umber's a very interesting character in the books, because like he has like this weird pseudo heel turn in the book, but then actually turns out not to have a heel turn. It's very weird. And clearly,
I probably need to reread book 3 because I only read it once and I don't remember a ton of it.
okay, well, because I don't think this is what they're doing with Umber. If you haven't read book 3, don't listen to the next minute of me talking, I guess, but it kind of is necessary for me to have this point. In the books, what you find out is that Umber didn't actually get killed by Martin Chatwin, which same thing happens here, obviously. But the difference is that what actually happens is that Umber pretends to get killed by Martin Chatwin, and is actually in this like shadow version of Fillory, like underneath, and that's where he gave and what he made a deal with Martin in which like he gave Martin this power, and effectively speaking, by show speak, it's like he's the one who took Martin's shade, using show speak, which doesn't matter because I told people listening not to listen, but sure. he took his shade and was like the one that filled like with a gap with like this evil energy that helped Barton become like this monster.
Mhm.
And so like Umber's like this like villain, except then one of the big parts of the book 3 is you find out that like Ember goes like crazy. Ember was supposed to basically be like the good version of the two gods. He's like the law and order. He's supposed to be more of like the law and order and like the law and order god who like keeps things under. Hold on a second, plane's coming.
All right, I'll be back in a second. I'm gonna go fiddle with the AC.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back.
Ember's supposed to be more of like I won't say the law and order god, but he's like the more controlled, like supposed to be like the so-called good god of the two of them. And
the more responsible guy.
The more responsible one. He cares about Fillory, and because basically one of the big things about book 3 is this idea of like gods and like what rules things, and they were the gods of the land. But one of the big parts that they kind of get into in book 3, and this is the part I'm a little hesitant to, but like we'll see this is that Fillory actually goes through a transition period, and that's a big part of the books too. And so Umber's big thing is in the end he ends up being the person who does what's best for Fillory, where Ember doesn't care, which they're still kind of setting up this idea since Ember is like clearly a crazy person in the show that like is apparently just like I do what I want and maybe I just start over again. So that part's kind of there, but I'm just kind of interested. Like it seems like they've removed all the shading from like the Ember character, but they changed it, but not like just left it, but they've just changed him completely. So I'm just like, how do you? I mean, so it's kind of interesting to see how that compares. Where like it seems like he's now just much more of like a cowardly straight man.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, I've never really liked how that character is played because, like, and now that I know that he's supposed to be like the chaos god, I'm even kind of more annoyed because, like,
well, no, I'm talking about Umber, not Ember, but sure.
Well, I'm talking about Ember now. So
I'm just saying, you said I've never really liked how this character is played when I asked you a question about Umber, and then you started replying about Ember. I'm just saying.
You said, how did you what you talked about them both? Look,
but I asked how you like to change Umber. The Ember changes, I guess, also happened too. But fair enough. Just talk about both goat gods. It's fine.
Okay. So Ember is the one that we've had like experience with, and I've never really liked him. I think he's like silly and dumb, and that's like the reason that I've always said like the show would do better if he was like a giant ram instead of a humanoid person.
If he was Aslan the ram.
Yeah, if he was Aslan the Ram, which is what he's supposed to be, and that like that connection to Narnia is kind of lost when they're just like satyr type people, or whatever a ram person is. And now that I know he's the god of chaos, I'm like that doesn't really strike me as like a meaningful god of chaos either, because he's not like chaotic, he's just like silly. But
he's
anyway.
a little chaotic, but I mean, I think it fits more. I would agree that I would have made it a little more clear earlier. Maybe have you a little more stuff, but he's a little chaotic. He's more of like they made him more like fickle.
He's fickle, but he does things for reasons. Like they show up and ask for a favor, and he's like, "Okay, I'll do you a favor." Like he shits in the wellspring to protect the wellspring, not just because he felt like it. It's not he's not random. And to me, chaos has to be like more random than he is.
I wish they'd let us see him more because I could understand a lot of those things when the Beast was around, because it's just more like he's in self-preservation mode, so he has to act this way. So right. I will say it would be nice if we could have seen him more this season, and then it could have been more clear, kind of, that he was, crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll see how he plays him next episode. It might be better.
Because right now, I was like, you've only ever seen him when he's basically been in like fear for his life.
Yeah. But Umber, I mean, I liked this version of Umber. Like I said, I don't remember book 3 as strongly as I do the other books, especially towards the end. So I don't necessarily have like a huge connection to the way that character was portrayed there. I'll tell you what I loved about this episode. There are a lot of things I liked, but my favorite parts were the 3 parts in this episode where one character stood up to another character and said like, "Fuck you, you were responsible for this bullshit," which is like something I've been wanting from the show for a long time. And so like I really enjoy the dynamic that Quentin has with Umber here, where he's like, look, this is if this is who you are and this is who you're supposed to be, like, why are you not helping us? Why did you abandon Fillory the way that you did? And to me, like the kind of the righteous anger of that really scratched an itch that I've had for a long time. So I liked Umber, and I thought he was funny. I liked the Law and Order reference because I love Law and Order.
Yes.
And I liked his, I thought he had personality in this episode. A lot of their side characters they bring in, and they don't really have like strong characterization. And I felt like they did a good job between the house and the way he was acting of like making him a reasonable character.
Yeah, no, I mean, I still like this character. It's just, it is an interesting change. Like, this is one of the first times they've made a change where I don't necessarily have a problem with it because it seems like it fits the show better, especially because, I mean, I'll say the like massive turns that happen with Ember and Umber in the books are a little bit complicated, and like I don't know if it really would work on the show level, I guess, to be fair. So this,
I mean, I think if I could digress briefly, like I think that the third book has some weirdness to it because it's trying to like bounce off of the last Narnia book, and the last Narnia book was sort of trying to bounce off of like Revelations, and so there's like some weirdness that comes in terms of gods and plot twists and apocalypses that sort of are not as like organic to the work, I think.
Well, I think he was trying to do. I mean, I think he was trying to do a version of the last book of Narnia that wasn't as clearly Revelations.
Right.
Hold on a second.
Okay.
But yeah, that's true. That there's the books always had this weird relationship with Narnia, especially considering like Grossman has revealed that originally like he flat out just was using Narnia in his like original versions.
Yeah,
and like there are some artifacts that clearly never got fully ironed out when he like transitioned to, for like variety of reasons, transitioned to making his own world.
Yeah,
and so yeah, and I will say you're probably right that book 3 is the one that seemed to have the most versions of that, because they were obviously trying to do a different thing, and they wanted, and he wanted to have a different message at the end of his too than the end of book 7 in Narnia, which is just like all in on Revelations and lots of things that we're not getting into. I guess I will say I liked how much of a fanboy Umber was of Fillory. I think the only thing that I actually kind of wish they maybe done a little more time to let like Quentin geek out, and like maybe then like shows a more like interesting thing of him like then going, wait, why is this still happening? I hate this place, or like something. Because they had this part where like he naturally starts geeking out to stuff, and I'm kind of like, this feels a little weird. I wish he would acknowledge how weird it is that he still like feels this way, even though like.
Yeah, I think that goes to what we've been talking about, in that like they haven't really on the show reconciled like his kind of childhood love of these books and this place, and that his kind of fanboyism with the fact that he's like been there. Even like before Umber is revealed, like they're like, we've been to Fillory, and there's no like, I could have used a moment of like, we've been to Fillory and it's worse than you think, or something like that.
Yeah,
like, we know the real story. You collector of books, and then it turns out to be Umber.
Then it turned out to be Umber, and he's like, I'm aware of this too.
Yeah.
Like,
that's why Cube World would be way better.
Yeah, I mean that's true. That maybe could have helped. But I enjoyed. I said the biggest thing I'll just say about this episode was I did enjoy this episode, but this was one of the biggest examples of where I was just annoyed. Hold on a second. I'm just gonna keep allowing them to laugh because they're not gonna stop. And it's gonna be all over my backtrack. So enjoy the laughing backtrack. This episode was like the number one example of why, like, we talked about how the show itself can do really good episodes, but their seasonal arc stuff is a mess. Like, it all showed up to me because I was like, wow, I really liked a bunch of parts of the episode, but a lot of the moments didn't hit like they should have because, they hadn't earned them. So
See,
like,
this is interesting. We've switched places with this episode because I was like, this episode for whatever reason, this episode like really worked for me. So I'm definitely curious as we go through to hear you talk about the parts that you think didn't make sense, because maybe I just haven't thought it through properly, and
it's not that they
convince
it's
me.
not that they didn't make sense. They actually did make sense based on the show's logic. A lot of them.
Yeah,
So a lot of them I respect for that. I'm saying that this is, to me, I did like this episode. This episode should have just been better.
yeah.
It was my point is everything actually worked in this episode, and the fact that it was, instead of me thinking it was like an amazing episode, I simply thought it was a good episode. Like, it's bothersome to me. I mean, like I said, part of it is like you said, you have the thing where like they meet Umber and like that conversation half works. The Elliot side of it works, but the Quentin stuff doesn't entirely work because they don't properly reconcile like the holes they've had in developing Quentin's character and his issues with Fillory that come from like the problems he's had and how he's acted, and it relies a little bit too much on what he's supposed to be feeling when there's nothing in the show to really justify those feelings.
No, it's true, and there's also like there's I don't know if they missed this on purpose because they're going to come back to it later or not, but like when Umber was talking about creating a new world, like if I can delve into book 3 spoilers again, like that's something that Quentin does in that book. Like his act of creating a new world for him and Alice is like a bridge to Fillory, is like kind of the culmination of his arc, and it's all about him like going from somebody who, you know, is a son and a son of gods to, you know, a creator and an adult in his own right. And you know, there was no connection there between show Quentin and show Ember as people who kind of cared about these fictional worlds.
It's just a little off. I mean, it was just saying, like, Quentin still worked in this episode. Like, it's not like this isn't like the episode where I thought they failed Quentin. Like, he still worked, but like he just couldn't work as well as he could because they took him away from all the stuff the strong stuff, and he couldn't be around Alice.
Right. Well, he you know, but after Alice comes back, he's just kind of like Elliot's sidekick, which, you know, is fine for him, but still, like, you know, doesn't really do his own plot line a lot of justice.
Well, but see, that actually could have really worked, though. I think it would have been really awesome if they had properly explored the fact that Quentin's in this situation and he realizes that Elliot cares way more than he does, and he could have had a real moment of like realizing that like what he's missed and all the stuff because of what he's been dealing with Alice and stuff, and Elliot him could have had a real conversation about like kind of some of the stuff that's been happening. You know?
They make an odd pair, and I'm agreeing with you more and more that they should have delved into this, because like the contrast between somebody who loved Fillory and became disillusioned and somebody who was disillusioned and came to love Fillory, as Elliot has, is a really cool combination, especially as they both like stand ready to go and fight for it. And you're right, I think like more interplay between them about that subject like could have been really important to the episode.
Or even like, it's kind of unclear to me exactly, like, I'm gonna be honest, I feel like almost Quentin should have been like, I don't know, I think this world, like, I feel like there should have been a moment where Quentin gave some like really cold response of like Fillory can burn.
Yeah.
And then Elliot like snaps at him, and then like I think that would have been worked, and you could have explained it to real people and like all this stuff, and you know, and especially because I think I mean, there's still time, like you said, the finale could explore some of this.
Yeah.
And it could be especially helpful if they do this next season, or if they're going to go up to the big one, which is quite frankly what really should happen based on this version of Quentin, is they should all win, and then Elliot should banish Quentin because he's like, you don't care about Fillory, and I have to protect the kingdom, and that's how they do it.
Yeah.
And that really, to me, if they're building to that, then a lot of this works, and like Elliot just didn't bring it up because like he knew what he had to do already, and didn't want to deal with it, and he knew it. I mean, then you get into some real interesting stuff there.
Yeah, but there's no real sign of that. Like that scene, I don't know about you, but I laughed in that scene where Elliot was like, "So I need that button," and Quentin was like, "About that," because that's exactly what we said he would say. Yeah, but like Elliot is not overly upset about this. Like he's kind of annoyed, and then Quentin's like, "It's okay. There's the dragon like had a riddle," and Elliot's like, "Okay, we'll just do that then."
Yeah, that's another example of where I could have used a brief thing of like moment. I mean, I accept that possibly part of it was that Elliot definitely was just in a hurry, and he's like, whatever, you fucked up here, I don't have time to deal with this.
Yeah.
I mean, it just would have been interesting, I guess. Like, I just think that this could be setting up a real conversation, or maybe he becomes thinking someone tells Elliot this, like, Quentin's been bereft of duty, then Elliot has to, like, because Elliot kind of has a line like this in the book, when things happen, in which he kind of like has to be like say some different stuff, but for different reasons. And so I just wonder if maybe they're kind of trying to build something with with a set. They're missing a certain character here that would make part of it work. And so unless they're just gonna be really cruel, which I guess is possible, I don't know how much they can do parts of it. I mean, I will say it was nice. This is the closest. So like Josh will never be the Josh of like the books, who's awesome, but this is like the first.
This was definitely the closest. You're absolutely right.
This is the first time I've ever enjoyed anything he's done in the entire series, because that fucking scene where they all get high is amazing.
Yeah, that scene is great. The part where they're like, the throne's a curse, and he's just like kicking the thrones over, and like, then I will get a new throne.
He makes a new throne. The fact that they're like, do you wish to go and get crowned on the blah blah? And he's like, eh.
Yeah, like that version of Josh. See, that's a version of Josh that we've never seen before. Like the Josh who's like specifically defined as like, I don't care about the ceremony, I don't care about rules. I'm just going to do what I like and what feels good. The kind of the hedonistic Josh, which you've only really seen as like the flip side of that, which is the cowardly Josh.
And then I thought it fit really well because like in the end, when he was faced with like seeing like Fen, he was like, "Fuck it, I have to go help her." Like you got a minor bro. Like I said, it was the closest you've gotten him being the Josh from the books, and I thought it worked really well. And even beyond that, like let's say I hadn't read the books, to me this is the first time I've ever the character's just been interesting. Period.
Yeah, because this is the first time that he was not somebody's sidekick, that he had like problems of his own to deal with, and he had unique ways of solving them that are entertaining. Like it's as simple as that. I feel like.
And he kind of proved himself, I think, to be a nice, when Elliot gets back, he would be a nice counterbalance to Elliot, because Elliot would be freaking out and he'd be like, we just need to chill, man.
Yeah. Although, I mean, like that moment when he's like, Hakuna Matata has failed me, was just like,
yes,
so good. And I mean, I don't know that he's going to learn anything from that moment or whether I even want him to, but that was a great, just brief exploration of like, yes, Hakuna Matata is a really shitty way to live.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say in his case too, because the real change in his character doesn't come, and it's hard for the real change of his character to come because, like I said, there's a character who does not exist in this show that exists in the book, who is kind of important to Josh's ultimate end state. So unless they plan on making another character take her place, like it's kind of hard to see fully in the end, like what he's going to end up being. This also, but to me though, this is interesting because it does seem to suggest that he's going to have a bigger role going forward. Because I don't know why else you would bother giving him like that much of like your penultimate episode of your second season.
No, I think it was good, and I think like I think also too like it helped the Fillory scenes. Like I enjoyed his character, and then I enjoyed like Fillory around him because like it I don't know, maybe Ember has the right idea, because I think like the more chaotic Fillory was more entertaining than like the shitty West Wing Fillory.
Well, it just gave it more like energy.
Yeah,
and it felt more unique, and like he was using the drugs, and like I enjoyed when he wakes up after he slips, drinks up, and Margot's like yelling at him. And I also enjoyed the fact that like the little things, like Margot showed up and like, help me get out of here, and his response wasn't like, fuck you, Margot. He was like, he did try to help her, he just couldn't.
I love the moment where he gasses them all, and then he like drops the cloth he's using, and he's like, oh well, good thing I'm an expert at this.
Yeah, he's like, it could take me a while for this to happen to me. Yeah, I did like the nice moment in this episode. Like I said, there are nice little moments for seasonal. Like S realizes what is happening. He's like, don't breathe it in.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed S's anger as he just shows up and he's just like, the time for talking is over. I'm going to fucking cut you.
Right, but it all fit with his character really well, and I enjoy, like I said, when he clearly like smelled it and was like, oh no, I know what this is. I've experienced this before.
Yeah.
Because that dude totally was a stoner in college at some level. Come on. I mean, give me a break. There's no way in hell that didn't happen. Might be the very first thing he did. As soon as his mom might have been like, all right, as soon as you get there, I want you to do this.
I kind of want that spin-off show about like a guy who's like a prince from a fantasy world in America, like going to college.
I kind of do too. It's not a bad show.
Yeah.
Prince or princess who's like there and has to hide their identity. They're from like a magical land.
Yeah.
Learn to act normal. Could work really well. I can't decide the funnier version is like, because S was obviously a version of a prince who came from like a very like warlike area, or if it's funnier if it's like a really preppy, stereotypical princess.
Yeah,
it's hard to say.
I think we've just invented
We'll
like an Anne Hathaway movie, so maybe we should go the other route.
No, I'm fine with this. I saw. Look. I'm still on the. I'm on a. I still have plenty of real estate on Anne Hathaway Island. You all are haters. Colossal is great, and she is great in it, and whatever. I'm fine with it. Everyone hates her because they're just jealous. I'm sorry. So, Anne Hathaway is still great. So, yeah. Hashtag Anne Hathaway's always been great.
That's a ridiculously long hashtag. You fail at hashtags.
No, actually, that's
hashtag fail. Hashtag fail.
No, they get that long. I don't think you understand how ridiculous hashtags are in general. They just kind of keep going. But yeah, well, like I said, we did mention Margot. She appeared for 5 seconds and is gone. So I guess they kind of like had her.
One reason this episode worked is because the fairy plot wasn't in it. Tune in next week, guys.
Margot appeared for 5 seconds, and then they were like, all right, now punt that story to the finale.
Yep.
Punted it away. Finn also appeared for the same reason and punted it away.
Speaking of punting, I'm very excited to see what bullshit cliffhanger they're going to pull off next episode to match what they did the first season.
Yeah, unfortunately, it does seem like they're part of the belief of the crazy hip cliffhanger. Yeah. It's the wrong belief. Like, just so we're clear, unequivocally, every show is wrong. Pretty much every show is wrong that does this, unless their cliffhangers are things that have resolved real storylines, and then they're setting up the next storyline. But if your cliffhanger is things that like makes people question if people are dead or not, you've done it wrong.
Well, I mean, there's two exceptions. One is the excuse me, the God, what's that show? The superhero show on Sci-Fi?
Oh, Alphas.
Yeah, so there's two exceptions. One is the alphas where like you do it, or alphas or Hannibal where like you do it when your like renewal is in suspense, so that you can possibly like go out with a bang, or reshuffle the cast as needed. The other is like if you're a legitimate soap opera, like the famous episode of Melrose Place where the season ends with like the entire apartment complex like blowing up.
Yes, I was literally about to say, unless you're a legit soap opera, then you can do whatever you want, because that's the point. The cancellation thing is a dangerous game. You can do that once, but if let's say you get your miraculous save, if you do it again, you're just a dick.
Well, and magicians didn't do that either, because like had it been canceled at the end of last season, like that would have been the shitty non-ending to the show.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a big part of this is whether or not it actually works.
Yeah.
I still kind of stand by that. Hold on. I still stand by the fact that, honestly, ending seasons with characters you think you care about in peril, especially when almost every time they're never going to die, is a terrible idea. I just think it's, unless you're a show who is committed to killing off characters when that happens, I think it's a horrible, unnecessary thing that doesn't accomplish anything. And Alpha's got the one exception. You're right. Alphas also didn't do that their first season. So
no, it's true. They didn't. It seems to be a decent like second season maneuver. But I think it's also like, I mean, in general, you want a finale that makes you excited for next season, not a finale that makes you like fearful for next season / like just wanting the next 5 fucking minutes.
Right. I think that's my biggest problem with like what usually those are, is like they're set up for like a 5-second payoff.
Yeah.
And Smallville. I have a very guilty pleasure love of Smallville, but pretty much every one of their finales ended that way with some ridiculous thing, and that basically got resolved in like 5 or 10 minutes, and then they moved on.
But he's Superman.
He wasn't Superman yet. It's complicated.
Okay.
There was one finale, like I think the season 2 finale, that it just ended with a pretty fucking crazy cliffhanger, but it actually worked because it was more just like, holy crap, what will happen? It took an entire episode to address, which is what should happen with your, like if you do a cliffhanger, it should take your entire episode to address said cliffhanger. that's your thing, and it should be like, Game of Thrones gets away with some of those cliffhangers, but they also end seasonal arcs and set up new seasonal arcs.
Right, and they set up those new seasonal arcs at the end of the finale episode so that you have something to look forward to next year.
So if they want to do some crazy thing where, something happens, but they actually resolve most of these plot lines, that's fine. Or, the classic, like, they do this, then there's a rumble because the demon's appearing. That's fine, too. You're excited then if the demon's going to appear. But yes, if this episode ends tomorrow with every character dying again, I'm going to be really annoyed.
Well, I think it's interesting because, like, they're clearly, obviously, combining, like, book 3 and book 2 at this point.
Yeah.
And they're, like, rapidly running out of plotline material from those books.
Which may be a blessing in disguise.
Possibly. I mean, look, if they're like, look, we want to get through the material so that we can just do our own thing, like, I'll go with that. That's fine.
Well, I mean, just also because it does seem like a lot of times some of the big problems they have is when they feel the need to do certain book things, but they haven't set up. Their world doesn't fit the book anymore.
Right.
And so, like, if they just finish, then you're basically, I mean, yeah, at this point, I don't know what's much less. I mean, like I said, I think there may be a version, especially because they're doing the grand blanketing thing, in which like that may be a combination of the second and third in plot line. They're just going to make the third season about. But like, other than that, like really, if you think of what's left in the books, there's not much else that's really needed. There's like characters that no longer really serve a purpose anymore.
I mean, a lot of the stuff that they haven't used yet is like characters that aren't in the show. That it would be weird to bring back now. Stuff that relates really to like the time jump at the beginning of book 3 that they're not doing, so it probably wouldn't make sense to do. I don't know. I guess they could go back and finish fucking school.
Well, yeah. I mean, like school. I mean, there's just stuff with. I mean, the stuff with Alice is a big part of book 3, and it's kind of already happened. Surprise, people! That's what basically happens, and
that's what we've been talking about this whole time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little more complicated. It takes a lot. I mean, I actually was kind of okay with this in terms of like, I mean, I wish they'd shown Quentin prepping for it, but at least they acknowledge in the background, Quentin's like, I've been working on this all year. This is all I've been thinking about is actually how to do this. And I was using it. And then he also goes, and I used Alice's notes. And then I went and talked to Mayakovsky and he like confirmed it. And then there was the power batteries, which is really what he's used for in the books too. So
yeah. So here's my question about this. Like, how do you feel about this in terms of the seasonal arc? Because I was like, at this point, I was like, fuck it. You've been trying to do this show for so long. You haven't let us get away from Alice. Like, just like get it over with.
I mean, I've said before, I've had a hard time being as critical about some of the Alice stuff just because like, this was just a hard thing to do. I mean,
but do you feel like what if you, looking back at it now, because we've had this for, she died in what, episode 2 or 3?
I think it was the 3rd episode.
Yeah, so she died. She died like 8 hours ago. The question really is like, what story did that tell? Like, did that tell a story about Quentin growing up and getting over her? Like, what do you think this is supposed to have said this whole time?
Well, I will say one thing before we get into that part. The one big misstep they had was they brought that monk in, who clearly is going to be a bigger deal later, I assume. Because you don't bring that crazy Niffin monk in and then never mention him again. I think they really could have. They could have used an episode where we're just with Alice as a Niffin doing stuff.
Yeah.
Because one of the big things in the books is yes, when Alice comes back, she's really angry because like she's angry because she was turned back normal. And there's a bigger thing here because like she's still like 24 and Quentin's now like 30.
Yeah.
And she hasn't aged while he has, and she's an NG base was forced, but she's been a Niffin for like 6 years, though.
Yeah, she spent like a subjective eternity like without form as just like pure intellect, going anywhere, doing anything.
Well, that was the one part I will say that was a little bit weird because technically speaking, there's a weirdness to her because she was kind of free, but kind of not free because like she was kind of also trapped. It was a weird thing.
Yeah.
But yes, like she had time to like do like the stuff she talked about exploring and learning. She had time to explore that, which is why I think they could have used the scene. So maybe they'll give us like the flashback of it in season 3, which would be helpful.
Well, I don't think they will. And I'll tell you why. I think like she comes back in the show and she's like, God, she's like trying to write it down. She's like, I remember so much about magic that's just like fading away. And I'm like, oh, so like Niffin is the state in which like magic is undenerdified. Like that's where all the nerds go to just nerd out over magic. And now she's back among the living and in the flesh, where like there's no time for that because plot.
I mean, maybe it's hard to say, but yeah, I mean, as for the arc, I mean, since Quentin has been the one character I've like enjoyed his arc this season for the most part of. I think I mean, I do think they showed a different thing of like a dude trying to get over it and realize. I think they changed it to instead really being like getting over her is maybe not the right word, which is great, but it's more like him understanding what it meant to be in a relationship with Alice and what to do now, and him kind of failing at it. And
does this go all the way back to season 1? This is me like trying to dredge up my memory here. Didn't like the infamous like relationship breaking threesome happen like because of the emotion bottles or something?
Yes.
Yeah. So like there's no opportunity for Quentin here to like come back and interact with Alice and be like, oh, I was immature back then, but I've grown through the process of losing you and regaining you, because like they fucked up the beginning of this.
That's not entirely true, because they already had that conversation at the beginning of the season. They had that really good conversation, the two of them, in which they go, there's a lot of issues we need to iron out. But, you know, she's like, I want to be your friend again. And they're clearly on the path to like trying to fix this again. And then
what was the point? How did he change over the course of these 8 episodes? That's my question.
His changing has, I think, just been more like they've been trying to layer this like part of it. I think I need to see the final part of this, because most of his changes have been how disillusioned he is with magic. But he like can't let it go as well, because it's a part of him, and him not being able to properly.
But magic, he was disillusioned because it couldn't bring Alice back, and then it fucking did.
Well, no, right. I'm saying they need to resolve some of the and then he kind of got stuck between just helping Julia and helping Alice. I'm interested to see if, in his case, probably the big thing is, he's got they need to have some realization of him, like, actually he didn't actually grow that much, because really he's just been spending the entire season like trying to do things for other people and not thinking of himself in terms of like thinking of what he wants for the world. Because I do think in a third season, what they should be doing with Quentin is Quentin should be basically going, well, now what do I do? My entire life had been like, effectively, we'll just say this, like saving both Alice and Julia.
Yeah.
And hypothetically speaking, we'll see how it ends. They're both saved now.
Yeah, it seems like it.
So, like, you know, at that point, what does that mean? I mean, there definitely is some things where he's a different person. He definitely gained perspective on his relationship with Alice, I do think. And, you know, he still needs to have that conversation. He hasn't had a chance to have the conversation yet about like what's happened. I do think he now will like kind of acknowledge things that he did wrong in the past, and maybe he'll just be like, I can only care about, you know, at least if nothing else, I think part of this season was Quentin not real. Like, I think was that for the show's purposes is Quentin didn't really know what he cared about. And now he knows what he cared about above all, ultimately, is effectively, I mean, Alice and Julia. I'm gonna be honest. He doesn't seem to really care about anyone else. Kind of cares about it. I mean, at this point, he cares, and his friends. He cares about his friends. I'm joking a little bit. He cares about Fillory at this point because Elliot cares about Fillory.
Yeah.
To me, that's what it seemed like. I guess there's a part of it that
I think just goes back to what we talked about, I think last episode, of just like how like impoverished his character is at this point, because he doesn't really care about anything beyond these people and like what's happening next on the show.
Which, you know, it's worked really well for his character this season, and there's a really good arc you can do with that now if you then next season have him have to like try and deal with that, which is one reason why I can't entirely comment all on Quentin's until the finale, at which point it could just fall apart completely.
Yeah.
But I do think there's a really good way of setting up like Quentin only caring about the stuff could really set up him like losing, how easy it is for him to lose everything then, if like basically if the end of the season is like through a bunch of events he has none of them.
Maybe.
I mean, that's to me that's how you recreate this as close as possible to the iconicness at the end of the second book. Is Quentin's character seems to be leading to this point where, as we said, he really only cares about his friends and he's only dealt with them. So let's say we take that away and Quentin's basically left to like, you know, be the one person who's finishing his education at break bills.
That would be
like, that'd be fun. Well, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, what does that mean? Like, that's to me. And so that's why I can't fully comment upon things until we get to that point, because I still kind of feel like that's where they're going, because like it makes the most sense. Like every part of his character arc seems leading to that point of like, you can, Alice, the big thing is like how you deal with. I mean, the other version is they're leading to this point where just like Quentin doesn't want to go back to Fillory, and instead he just wants to be like, they have him just say definitively like, actually, I'm happy on Earth. I don't need this stuff anymore. And the whole point of this arc has actually been like, this is him finally acknowledging this, and the show was actually saying like he just was refusing to do it, and this is the point of getting him to that point. And then it's just like, the end state is it's like him, Julia, and Alice hang out in the real world.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to say like what his driving need is at this point now that Alice is alive again.
I mean, presumably it's to like. I mean, I thought Quentin handled stuff with Alice mostly pretty well in this episode because, like, he showed up. It was an interesting combination of like he cleared it up and he's like, I'm going to do whatever it takes that she needs from me. But he also clearly had some of the selfish part. But I need her to also want to be with me, which I was fine with because whatever, he's still in love with her. Like, fine.
Yeah.
I do think it would be interesting if he has a moment where she's like, she does though kind of acknowledge and she clearly doesn't want to talk to him. Like, all right, well then I'll leave you alone, and I'm here. But that does seem there's some growth moments there. He didn't try to force it.
Hang on. I'm sorry. Hang on 1 second. I was like, why is it still so hot? And it was like, oh, the heat's on instead of the cold. I was like, damn you, Ness.
But I guess what I'm ultimately saying is we'll see in the finale. There's a good. This is kind of my way of setting up that if like they just destroy this in every way, like I will retroactively like just shit on all of Quentin's character this entire season. It's very possible because then none of the stuff matters. I mean, a lot of how stuff is if I see that arcs are going places, I don't like really going too critical unless it's like something absurd happens, kind of like what happened in the episode where he sends Alice away.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I mean, to me, like, what I'm the answer to my question of like, has Quentin learned anything in these 8 episodes? And you're like, no, but the 9th looks good, and I'm like, oh, that's fair enough.
Well, it's just more like, I think to be fair, we can't answer that because all the stuff he needed to do before we could find out what he's really learned has now been answered. So now it's time for him to answer that question.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, and he hasn't really had time to. And so so we'll see what he does with this. And if the show is going to acknowledge what we've been seeing as things, or if they're just going to pretend none of it ever happened. And like, instead Quentin's just in Fillory at the end. He's like, no, I'm all happy. And we're like, are you? Why would you be happy? You hate this place. Everything about it's been terrible to you. Nothing about this has been good. Ever.
You know what I wish they had more time for was like talking to each other about what's happening and what's happened to them. Like when I was thinking about like, yeah, the end point of this arc is really like, the serious conversation he has with Alice next episode. Like I kind of want part of that conversation for him to be like, oh, hey, I met like a badass version of you from an alternate timeline. You were missing fingers. It was weird.
Yeah, no, I agree. It'd be great. I mean, in general, I've always wanted them to talk more, but that's because like these characters actually work well together, and most of them, even the characters you think don't, work well. Like the actors, part of the reason the show I continue to find the show intriguing is, like I said, they cast it well. It's just, other than Josh, but that's, and in this episode proved that the actor is actually fine. It was just the writing for him.
Yeah, I think it's like, in terms of not talking enough, like these characters work together so well when they're just hanging out. But like the show spends way too much time in like the mode of like a magical like 24, where they're just like, the next thing is we've got to go here, Chloe, let's go. Yeah,
they do. They do spend way too much time, and it is a little bit sad sometimes. They're a little bit too plot obsessed, and it shows.
Yeah.
But like we'll see. I mean, same kind of. It's hard to. There's not really much else to talk about with Alice. Like we said the part like she's angry about being brought back and wanting to do magic. There's like a thawing a little bit because Quentin shows up, and I get it. There was like a look of Quentin being like, "Hey, what's up? You want me to stay? No, right? All right, I'll see you." And then Alice is a look on her face. It's like, "I kind of did want you to stay," and then that's it. You don't really get much with her. So
my only actual quibble with that part of the episode was like I said, I loved when Quentin was like, "This is all your fucking fault, Mayakovsky," You'd better help us now. And then the show was like, we're moving too fast to even give you like one tiny beat of Mayakovsky like coming to realize the truth of these words. He just like glances and then it cuts to him helping. And it was like, what are you doing? Give us that moment, goddammit.
Yeah, but I thought there was enough. He kind of showed a little bit of regret in general. But yeah, that was the righteous moment I was cool with, was Quentin be like, this is seriously legitimately all your fault. Like, I hate you. You will do this. And Mayakovsky being like, yeah. All right. I like they let Quentin do the spell. It showed some competency from Quentin. That was good. Like, I like that after Quentin spent the entire season researching something, they're like, you sure you can do it? And he's like, yeah, yes. I've spent the entire season doing this moment. I can do this spell, and he did. So I mean, like that scene worked. I liked that Julia helping him. I like how they explained what had happened, which was that apparently Alice's shade left because she became Julia's shade for brief moments.
Yeah, I like that explanation, and then I was like, wait a minute. If we take Julia's shade away, then she can like go back to the underworld some other way and come back, and she's just, she could just be like a shade carrier as long as she needs to.
I mean, that'd be really cool too. That's another spinoff show that sounds.
Yeah. The
Shade Delivery Service. You go
the Ghost Rescuer.
Yeah, the Ghost Rescuer. But I guess there's not much else to say. I mean, that scene was cool. Mayakovsky is always great to be on the show. I like seeing him more. We'll see what he does more. And his conversation with Alice about like what being alive means, I thought also was helpful. Because
the best goddamn conversation he's had on the show.
And to be fair, that I made the joke about what her feeling towards Quentin was, but that was also influenced on Mayakovsky. Like he's like, you're back. You get to be alive and feel things and do stuff. And Alice is like, wait, that's true. I like those things. And that's kind of what that look with Quentin was too. But that came from the conversation he had where he was like, and also like, it kind of was like the Highlander argument. There's an episode of Highlander that was basically, a friend of the main character who was like a music like aficionado discovered this like genius pianist who was also a Highlander but didn't know it yet. And so he like arranges for her to die to become a Highlander, because then he's like, oh my gosh, it's like what if you knew the whole point of the episode was like, what if you knew like Mozart and you could make Mozart live forever, and thus Mozart could like infinitely make great music. Except the whole point of the episode was actually that like when she became a Highlander, she like started to suck. Because like the idea was that like without like the threat of death, like you weren't the threat of death or feelings or any of like things like that, you weren't pushed to like create this, and it like took away from a creative wellspring. And that's kind of like they use a very similar he basically used a similar argument. Mayakovsky used a similar argument with Alice here of like, like now you'll be now you can do real magic, because like before, kind of you said, it's like before you were amongst all of it, none of it mattered. Now it can matter, because if you do any of this now, it's a big deal.
Yeah, what's interesting is that like the show, I thought the show laid out a lot of its themes in that moment compared to the books, and in a way that didn't actually make me go, the books were better. It was just different. In that like the books really look at like the existence of magic, and they say like there's sort of an existentialism to it of like none of this has any meaning, because with infinite power comes like zero meaningfulness, when you can do anything, like why do anything? And the book's kind of answer to that is like, well, you create your own meaning. And the show took a slightly different tack, where like the show presents a world that, like, as Mayakovsky said, is like fucked up in every way. And the meaning of magic is like making the world a better place, making the people around you, better and happier, which I think is an interesting thing that does fit what the show has been doing this whole time.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think it's an example of like, a lot of this stuff did work because the thread the show did have and they have maintained did come together in this episode, which is why it's a good episode. It's just like, there were, I think mainly it was just kind of, a lot of it was just like the Quentin stuff doesn't quite work yet, because it doesn't seem like they've quite reconciled what to do with him. And especially considering, as we joked about, he's been best so far being not part of the plot. Like his own plot is what matters, and anytime you put him on part of like what the main plot is, it's like he gets muddled.
Well, we'll see if he can survive mixing with the Fillory plot.
Yeah.
But that's the end of our episode. We don't have to talk about. Yeah, we should talk about Penny and stuff.
Well, I mean, and the Julia stuff's actually interesting.
Okay.
Penny is actually, this is the most interested I've been in Penny in like a while.
No, this was honestly the best Penny material in quite some time.
Like Penny worked really well, partially because
all he needed was to get severe radiation sickness.
Well, no, but I will say I'm sad that characters that we joked about, this girl being fridged, and I mean joked in that we weren't sure what to call this, but I am sad in that like she did help Penny be more interesting.
Yeah, she like
her energy worked with Penny.
I was very annoyed with her death because like not just in terms of like fridging or reverse fridging or whatever you want to call this. The fact that she was like kind of created to deliver exposition, like be a plot device and die, is kind of annoying. But it's also annoying because like I talked before about how they sort of gave her this terrible shorthand pop culture characterization, and then they spent her entire screen time like hinting at all these things that she had in her past or motivations that she had, and then they sort of just like let all those die with her in a way that I feel like does kind of a disservice to a character that was like fun and interesting and good for Penny during the moments she was on screen.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Hold on one second. And okay. Resisting the rage because I'm just like, really, guys, you didn't even try. Not even try. You just like hear I'm gonna enjoy walking downstairs. Like, well, thanks for literally giving zero effort whatsoever to even pretend you're going to lower your voices. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it made me sad. I mean, I thought this worked really well. They went into the poison room. I liked the idea that they were like, is this actually poisonous? And then like, what happened? The books themselves were kind of poisoned. And
well, it seemed to me like they had just like put their dangerous books room in like a world or a timeline that it was like post-nuclear holocaust.
It's hard to say because like Penny didn't really get fucked up till he grabbed the book.
I guess, but yeah,
he grabbed the book and literally from the book, like radiation poison went into him.
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed kind of like, creepy and like there's that like dust and ash in the air kind of feeling to it.
I mean, it's likely that you're also correct, but it does seem like the book accelerated it.
Yeah, probably.
That's the right way to say it. Like, so, but yeah, like it worked really well for Penny. Penny, him going and basically, them. I'm hoping maybe this is also going to be part of them playing off like. This is a part where Penny's storyline sadly would have been helped to work for because this is the moment where like the fact that Penny can't use his hands and travel has cost him severely.
Yeah.
And so if you're ever going to make that plot line matter, now is, I mean, next episode, he better react properly to the fact that like this is all because of him being a dick. And like, if this is all about like him, like, if this is all about like supposed to be part of helping make a profound change, it could kind of work, even if getting there has been terrible and most of the storylines have been shit.
Except that hilariously, like the message from the exact plot workings of her death is like, he's like, no, wait, I want to do something for you by saving you, and she's like, no, save yourself. Think only of yourself.
Well, no, she does say, to be fair, like she legit. I actually thought it was interesting because like she legitly says, I thought that was a perfect moment of fate thing where she says like, if you try to save me, you'll die. And I'm like, wait, is that in your book? Didn't you just say you can't change fate? So
right,
you're now.
That was my problem with that. Like she when she says that, like the actual like interesting way to do that is for her to say, you can't do this because my book says you don't.
But yeah, but that's not what she says. She says like,
she has like, even though these books are supposed to be just written out in fate, like she has like an if-then clause, of like, I've read ahead, I die, and if you try and pick me up, then something else happens.
Yeah, it's weird. I feel like they could have really addressed that more, and they didn't. And it kind of like, even though I like the Penny plot more, it just did reinforce again how like so much of it's broken. But yeah, we spent enough time talking about Penny. Like you got a compliment, Penny, and we like actually enjoyed your storyline. So moving on. Yeah, so then we have the Julia and Katie stuff. And the Julia stuff I liked really well. I think I like how they kind of figured out the best way to use her, of her just being like, look, my solution to these problems is I'm going to hang around people who won't suck. And those people will ensure I don't become a monster. And I'm like, that's a good solution.
Yeah, that is legitimately like her just being like, look, I no longer have a conscience, so I'm going to like outsource this to you.
She's like, I remember having a conscience, and she wants to have sort of one because she does. It's also clear from this that means she kind of does still care about people, like, which we hinted at, but it clearly has to be the case. Like, she legitimately has to somewhat still care about certain people, or else there'd be no reason for her to care about. Like, it's not like she does this is like, I need this to happen because it's more convenient for me if I'm not just murdering people for no reason all the time. It's like, no, I want this to be the case. And they even have that nice moment, of course, where she says something, she does say the thing, and then Katie looks at her and she's like, too far? Okay. Too far. Too far. And obviously the discussion of them trying to figure out how to do, the discussion later where like, where Katie's like, I told you we're not killing him. She's like, right, we're not killing him. But I'm just saying, like, and she's like, I mean, she says like a new explanation and her like thinking. I will say this: the Christopher Gorham character who played the senator, for the most part, I think they wasted him because I actually like that actor. I think they kind of wasted him here. But I will say that I did like the part with Julia anyhow, where he sends her to get pizza. And I hate that he did it to Katie, but there was like a weird, beautiful yet terribleness to it, where it was like, he's like, someone has to do this, and I refuse to make it be Julia again. I kind of wish it hadn't had to be Katie, and he had said figure out a way to just kill himself, but I guess maybe it doesn't work that way.
I don't feel like, and I'm not sure there was a way to do this without giving him way more screen time than he deserved. I do not feel like they properly earned him committing suicide.
Yeah, I mean, it was weird.
Partly because of his character, like I didn't feel like his character would be to that point yet, and then partly because they did not like make the actual like plot machinations here sensible enough for us to understand that like that was the only way to harness his power. Yeah, I didn't like that moment.
It was weird. I agree with you on that part. I'm just saying I did like the moment with him and Julia.
No, I agree. I like the way they did it. Well, yeah, I like the.
It's hard for me to properly parse this because, like I said, I love what he did with Julia, but what he did to Katie is also really terrible on a lot of. It's like it's hard for me to. So it's like I liked half of it, but then the other half, it has to happen though from that decision, and you're just like, wow, like you're kind of left with this like shitty situation, but I guess it's just where like I acknowledge how horrendous it actually is. Me to almost say like I like how he like let one person like forcibly made another person murder him and scar her for life because she hasn't had enough happen to her yet. But I don't know, it still worked.
Well, here's the other thing about that moment. Like, okay, it's 2017. 90 years ago or whatever, they made a movie based off of Dracula the play, and there's a moment in that movie where, just like in the play, somebody looks out the window and they're like, there's a giant hound bounding across the lawn, because they had not yet realized yet that like cinema means you can show things and you don't have to just describe them off screen. It's 2017. The magicians need to learn that when there's a creepy murder ritual, put that shit on screen because it's interesting. Don't just have Katie stumble down the stairs going, yeah, so a creepy murder ritual happened a moment ago. Just fill you in here.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that too. And I think maybe that would have fixed the half. If he had then told Katie and then done it, and then they go through this and he apologizes and they explain, I think that would have then made the weird stuff with Katie work better because you would see it and you'd understand what happened and like the sacrifices being made. I actually think the better version of this would have been if he had walked up to Katie and said, I can't make Julia do this. It's like, Julia will agree to this, but this has to happen. And then like they'd had a conversation, and the better version would have been if he had just convinced her to do it on her own. And then
I'm not sure he needed to mind control anyone, or at least he could have tried not doing that first, because like, they don't want to kill him, but if he's like, look, I want this and it makes sense and there's no other way, then like, I feel like that's an argument that could be convincing and that would be way less fucking traumatic.
Especially if he sends Julia away. I think another version that could have worked also would have been if, they could have had the ritual start to happen, and then he convinces Katie to do it, and he's like, look, this has to happen. We all know it is. Julia would agree, and then she'll do it. We both agree she can't do this anymore, so I sent her away.
Yeah.
Katie do this for Julia, and then Katie gets to have the autonomy to say this. And then let's say she starts to waver, then he does it. But it's because he knows it has to be done. It becomes a little bit less weird. I think that would have fixed the whole where half of it's really good, but the other half is weird and doesn't quite work properly.
Well, here's what's extra awful about this. And I think this just kind of gets to the point of why this is so terrible, which is, we've talked about how the Senator has kind of been thematically a portrait of somebody realizing with horror, like that they've benefited from privilege in a way that is like, harmed people around them, harmed his wife and the senator that he argues with and other people in his life. And yet like the end of his character is him mind controlling these two women into doing what he wants them to do. And there's like really, I feel like thematically he should have, having seen these horrors, like decided like I'm gonna go out stopping this, but I'm gonna do it in a way that gives the people around me their agency back.
Yeah, like I said, or at least tries to, like you said.
Yeah.
I still am okay with what he did to Julia, actually. I actually think that worked. Half of it still works. I think even if he had done this, but like the Katie part doesn't work. I actually think the Julia part of him acknowledging like she would do this if I told her it was right idea because she has no, she can't, he doesn't quite understand that part, but like he doesn't like that one. You can make.
But I mean, like, again, that's still I understand that Julia is like impaired in a certain sense in this scene, but it's still like him making that choice, and he doesn't have that choice. Like we just talked about, Julia actively and of her own accord gave that choice and like control of her morality to Katie. And the actual way that scene should have gone is that he should have gone to the two of them and said, this needs to happen. And then Katie is like, Julia, I can't let you do this. I'm going to do this for you. And that would have preserved both of their autonomy.
I guess that's true. I mean, I guess what I'm saying, I think the version in which he eventually helped send her away because of this, like I said, there's parts they could have gotten to. Like, I do like that moment. They just didn't get to properly. Because, yeah, probably the better version is you're correct. Because he goes and talks to both of them, and then Julia's like this, and then she won't. And then she's like, no, I'm going to let Katie do it. Then he uses his power to send her away because he's like, this, because he didn't use it then after, like, Katie says she'll do it, but then Julia tries to do it herself, and they, like, do this. Then there's probably a way that would have worked better. That is true.
Yeah, I mean, to me, like, it should be a tragic irony that he has to use these powers that he hates in order to address this problem, and I didn't quite feel enough of that.
Yeah, that's true. Like I said, I felt it with the Julia part, which is probably why I still like that roughly, even with that. But the Katie part, it's a problem. Which is why I said it's a weird way for me to describe this. I'm like, look, part of it is reprehensible and terrible, but like part of it works, which means that, like, as we've said, we've kind of come up with the version that would have probably worked and what they're probably going for. I also wish his wife had been in more episodes.
Yeah,
because then it would have made it more like before, and like it would have actually been more tragic than if she kept appearing in episodes and he didn't realize what he was doing, and then finally that last episode he realized what she's doing, and then Renard kills his wife, and then it kind of fits more. But they needed way more time to have like Penny have plots where his hands were useless. So
also, if we, I know we have other things to talk about still, but if I can briefly delve into like the thinking behind giving him an ear. Like, an ear, as we know from other shows that I'm not going to name, an ear does not prove that somebody has died, because you can lose your ear and still be alive. However, the thought process seems to be, how do we prove visually that it's his wife? Well, his wife is a woman. Women wear earrings, therefore we will give him an ear with an earring in it, so that it visually represents his wife. That seems very fucked up to me.
Clearly, it should have been the hand. Clearly, they should have just said screw it and gone full 7 with it. I mean, I'm just saying,
exactly.
If you're go full 7.
Yeah, just I got you this box.
Traumatizing for a reason. But yeah, I don't like the Renard thing was ridiculous, and then they resolved that slot with Persephone and like whatevs. So let's get to the Julia part, because.
Well, what real quick, like I did think it was funny that we had like a reverse Batman v Superman here, where like in Batman v Superman, you're like, why did you make a spear? Fucking kryptonite bullets. Then you're done. And in this, like, they're like, this man killed himself, and we put it into a bullet. And I was like, what if you fucking miss? What is wrong with you?
They did acknowledge.
Cut him.
They did acknowledge that. Yeah, that one I was like, but why would you put it into a bullet? They could have gotten away with it, explained like, oh, it has to be in a bullet because there's only enough power for it to with the combinedness of the bullet, whereas like a blade wouldn't work. But yes, otherwise I'm like, what? No, you make a god-killing blade that always works.
Yeah. Like,
Supernatural, one of the weapons they've had for years is this like demon killing knife, because they had a gun that could kill everything, but the gun had limited amount of bullets. You know what the knife could do? Kill continuously. Not all the demons, not all the things the gun could quite kill, but most of the things, and the knife always works.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was weird. I was kind of like, what the fuck? Okay. The Julia stuff, I'm still torn on what to think about the Julia stuff.
In terms of her letting Renard go?
Yeah, in terms of like, well, actually, it's more of the shade part.
Okay. Well, we'll skip over the end of the plot line and come back to it. Talk about the shade.
I I don't I can't decide if her getting her shade back like undoes everything or it works. Her letting Renard go actually works. I actually like that. I think that was an actual good resolution for her story because the story of her trying to murder stuff was kind of an odious one, and her not killing him actually made that gave her an autonomy to make a decision for herself and not out of vengeance and for other and like it was her being like it's not the right her combination of her being like it's not the right thing to do, but also kind of acknowledging it wasn't the right thing for her to do. To me, actually worked really well.
The only thing that bothered me about that moment was like how poorly Persephone explained like what the ramifications of this would be.
Well, yes, that was my other problem was I did want her to be like either you go killing a god will like screw up the world, or you just go with the straight emotional like please let me deal with my son. He is my problem. Don't do this.
In terms of like, I wanted her to explain how she's going to deal with him because like, it just didn't make sense to me. She's just like, please don't. I'll see that he's taken care of or something. I don't even know if she said that much, but I really wanted her to be like, look, he's my son and he fucked up and I'm a god and he's gonna, spend, 1,000 years chained to a rock with a vulture eating his liver or something,
I mean, she said the deal with thing more came when she like was directly talking to him and she's like, I'm so disappointed in you and like this will be addressed. Yeah, I mean, yes, it would have, especially because she's Persephone. It's like he's going to go to the underworld. We will deal with him because I'm like, yeah, you're from the underworld. Like you could deal with this.
It also, unless I'm mistaken, it also didn't explain why she's been gone for so long.
Well, I've always assumed her being gone for so long is related to this grand blanketing thing and the god stuff in general, which presumably is their setup. I assume they're going to set that up as part of season 3. That's always been what I had imagined.
Okay,
is that a big part of this the god because of the god stuff is that like they're going to set up this gods thing in general. Ember is going to be like the tip of the iceberg, but we'll see. You're right. You are correct though. It was weird. You didn't explain that. She's like, I'm gone. It's like, why were you gone? Maybe tell us. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It would have helped. But yes, that's like I like that she let him go, but I agree the scene was done poorly, and I was like Katie, like I would be pissed, even though I know I was like, yeah, I would still be pissed with Katie because Persephone did a shit job of explaining what was going on, and so it looked to Katie like just let her go, and like as you said, if I'm Katie, she's like she didn't tell you how he was going to deal with them, she didn't say this, she made.
Well, it's like the show has convincingly made the argument that like there is a vengeance reason to deal with him, but there is also a like he is a danger to the community reason to deal with him. Yeah. And that was what Julia really betrayed by just letting him go without being sure that he was no longer going to be a danger.
Right. And so in Katie's case, she's like, I had to sacrifice so much to do this and like do this stuff for you and all these things. And I was in the clear and, all this stuff. And so like, yeah, I can understand like Katie's anger is a reflection of the things you just said in that conversation. Like, that's why I was like, that's why, for example, if Katie had been her being angry, like, no, it makes sense. They didn't really explain that really well. I'm just saying like, I found that decision work arcly. It actually fix a lot of. I actually thought that decision made her arc fit better this entire season.
I didn't begrudge it. I felt like it would have worked either way. I didn't think it would have been broken if she had just killed him and been like, I'm still a broken person.
Oh, I don't think it would have been either. I think I'm just saying like I didn't expect him not to die.
Yeah.
So I actually didn't think they would do this solution, and this is to me the more interesting solution.
Yeah.
I agree it wouldn't have broken the storyline. I think this is the better one going forward. I do think this is the better choice. But the shade part is what I don't know what to deal with.
Well, we're going to disagree because I'm going to bring in Moana. So spoilers for Moana. That's just like the most recent version of this trope, which is the trope of like kind of as soon as someone proves that they have like grown in some fashion, like a character goes through an arc because they lose something, and by the end of that arc they succeed by proving that like they didn't necessarily need that anymore, and then as a reward they're given it anyway. That always kind of bothers me. It bothered me in Moana. It bothers me a little bit here. It's just a thing that people like to write in their stories because like I don't know, it's not the 80s anymore, and you can't end with like them getting the love interest like a trophy. I don't know.
Well, that wasn't the. Oh, Like a trophy. Oh, sorry. I thought you were doing a Seven reference again. Um,
No, I did not mean getting in a box. That was the 90s. Two different decades.
I don't hate that trope. I just think in this case that trope is weird. I mean, in this case, using it is weird because it affects her character going forward. I don't know what you do with her character now that like they've kind of taken it. Like this isn't. I guess this is one of those ones where I'm not sure what they're gonna do because of how different this will make her from the books. Like,
yeah, well, it's.
She was already very different, but I kind of like that they figured out a different version of what she was. I was finally actually really interested in the version of Julia without her shade. They'd found a version. I thought that was gonna be a really interesting character going forward, and they could do a lot of fun stuff with it. And then they just kind of were like, "Nah, she can have it back." And I'm like, "But that was what?"
Yeah, I mean, in a certain sense, like this episode, this was another one. I think they'd done this before. This was another episode where like they in closing off plot lines, they've like totally reversed stuff that they've done for so long. Alice comes back from the dead. Julia gets her shade back. It's sort of like in order to pull it off in a good and meaningful way, the journey had to have been worth something, and that's something the show really struggles with.
I mean, I will say this: the Alice one, like I said, there's an issue. Julia, I will say I thought her journey to get this actually made sense in a lot of ways, but except it's like there's two conflicting versions because the problem is that if let's say the Alice thing hadn't happened, then this would make more sense. I guess my bigger problem is after what she did where she sacrificed her shade for Alice's to then do this, that's when it bothered me. Is I was like, well, wait, the whole point of the sacrifice of her Alice thing is now you just undid that sacrifice too.
Right. That's the problem I have generally with this trope is like, does gaining back the thing you sacrificed invalidate the nature of that sacrifice or the meaning of that sacrifice? And I think there's an argument to be made that it really does.
I think it depends on, my problem is, I guess, depends on the sacrifice. For example, I think her sacrifice and killing Renard and getting her shade back, that in its own works. I think combining it with the one she'd already made with Alice, that one doesn't work anymore because that was a moment simply designed around. It depends. That's why I said I don't universally hate this trope. The reason the Moana one didn't bother me is because for one, he wasn't actually the main character, so I don't give a fuck. But for two, like I thought it actually worked better because it proved it. But like by giving him back the thing, he could get back to doing. In that case, it worked for me because the idea was we're going to give this back to you because now you can go back to doing what you did before, and help the world. So like that one kind of works for me anyhow there. Whereas in this Julia one, I'm like, I don't know, like her giving up the vengeance one, that sacrifice wouldn't have been invalidated to me because she didn't do it. That's fine. But yes, for whatever reason, the Alice one doesn't feel like it's like the ramifications of what that should have meant doesn't work as well.
I guess I felt like the sacrifice that she had to make at the end of the Underworld episode was like arbitrary already. And so like the arbitrary reversal of that didn't really bother me so much. It's just like the show just kind of doing what it feels like doing.
I guess it's also more because I felt the loss of her shade permanently is a real sacrifice. Her not killing Renard to me was not one. Maybe that's the bigger thing. So maybe that's probably didn't feel that way in this case. Because like to me, her not killing Renard wasn't nearly as big of a sacrifice as like when she gave up basically her ability to be human again. And she has that really poignant moment with Quentin in which she says, like, this is the last time I may have a shade, and she wants to express him with emotion. So to me, that was a real sacrifice. So yes, in this, I guess it's hard to say. It depends on the ones. In this case, yes, this is one where I do feel like it invalidated it. But
I understand. I'm torn because, like, we've talked before, I think, about how, Julie in the book is somebody who kind of learns that, like, life does terrible things to you, and you have to, like, figure out how to live with them without letting them define you.
Or or more importantly, also, or constantly make excuses about how like life screwed you, and thus like you're owed retribution for that.
Without doing that, usually.
No.
Take a dig at Julia. I'm saying by the end of the book.
No, that's what I'm saying. Beginning of her character, because one of the big parts of her character and why she gets so deep is that her bitterness comes from her thinking she's owed things that she's not, and part of her in-state character is when she realizes that as well, and like. Is my point.
Yeah, so I think that there's a contrast here to the show where I don't think that would play as well because it goes back to my kind of anger at the show at the fact that the show like won't stop raping her, and so like whatever the reasons behind her getting her shade back, I'm like the show has finally stopped raping her. I will accept this.
No, that's true. The show, I think actually my biggest problem was that her giving up her shade was the first time she willingly let go of something.
Yeah.
And instead of the show taking it from her. And so to me, the show giving it back to her kind of also took away some of the agency we've kind of talked about that she had gained through doing that. It was weird. I don't hate it.
Like I can see that. It's a very strange moment. I agree.
Right. It's weird. Like I said, that's why I guess the Renard version. That's why I said originally the Renard version would have been fine with me too. If they didn't do the shade give up, the Renard version would have been fine because then they could have this big thing where she gives it up. And if they want to give her their shade back, then I'm willing to let that go because you can make an argument that part of this arc was supposed to be her getting over this and her not letting. And you could have made the argument that was about her like not letting the rape define her anymore, and then she gets her shade back and yada. Fine.
Well, the other thing that's weird about it is that, and I feel like the show kind of breezed past this, is that, you remember way back in the beginning of the season, the Beast is telling her, like, you're feeling the pain of this rape, and, if I take your shade out, you'll be happier because it'll take the pain away. So when Julia gives mercy to Reynard, a lot of her, like, pain from what he did to her is, like, gone. So she's considering this, like, more dispassionately than I think is fair. Like, I think if Julia, if Julia from before she lost her shade had been able to talk to herself in that moment, she would have been like, you don't understand. You don't feel it the way that I feel it. He deserves to die.
Yeah, and I assume that she will feel that as well when she gets her shade back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know how I feel about this moment because at one level I think it actually helped her arc fit, but the other level it's a complicated thing of like I didn't hate it. I don't know. I don't know entirely how I feel about it because it's so weird.
I think ultimately it's something that the show did mainly in the name of expediency of like, we need to close off this plot line. We need to get Julia back to normal. We need to figure out what's next for her. And like all decisions like that the whether that's worth the stuff that we've talked about is really dependent on like what they do next with her and if it's more worthwhile than what they would have done.
Yeah, I will say, and the expediency thing, even that I can't say entirely because her entire season was based around this. So like that's kind of why I guess that's kind of why I'm not entirely discounting that too because I think for the most part that actually worked. Like her art, for example, you asked me this Quentin thing and I'm like, I gave like this weird like I don't know answer, but like Julia, I could actually answer these questions. Like her, now that I've seen the end of her arc, it makes some of her past stuff actually work better and like it fits because I've seen part of this arc. And now if I see what she goes from here, you can go that. It's like that. So that's why these things help. And so like on some level now, I like a lot of Julia's stuff works more for me and I can see them actually having done it, even if they wasted time with things and there were other issues, but a lot of that wasn't the plotting. They actually did plot this fairly decently.
Well, this is why the shade thing bothers me the way the emotion bottles bother me because like it provides this like magical manipulation rather than having it come organically for the character. Because if you ask me, you said that and I thought about like how I answered that question of like, what has Julia learned over the course of these episodes? And I think that she's learned that her pain is not the most valuable thing that she has, that there are other things that are more important to her. But I don't know how much of that is due to things that she's due to her actually learning that or due to her having her pain like, forcibly removed from her.
That's fair. I'm just saying we can have that conversation.
Yeah.
Like, about that arc and then we question it. And I feel like that's probably going to be something she deals with. I mean, I would assume that her next step is going to be in some level dealing with what we've just talked about because like even this show is not going to have her just suddenly be like, okay, I'm good. I got my shade back. Everything's great. Like, I presume she's going to be very emotional. It's going to become similar, I'm assuming, to like how Quentin, if we're going to use the terrible emotion bottles, how everyone felt after they first, were offset emotion bottles.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll see. I mean, I just feel like I need to give them some, since we've been iffy on the Julia storyline, it's like, I feel like some level I have to praise it. Another level is this. We've had the concerns. And to me, the Julia part of this episode was actually, I mean, the Elliot part of this episode was my favorite part of the episode, but the Julia part was probably my second favorite part of the episode in terms of other ones. I count the Josh thing as its own separate stuff because that is enough. Well, I'm just saying, like, this show's really good at constructing scenes. So since Josh has had nothing to work with, of course, once you do an entire scene in which Josh is actually good, it works.
I mean, I liked Julia. Like I said, of the three moments here that I loved, I really liked Julia turning to Persephone and being like, "You fucked up, and I got hurt," and really like taking her to task for that in a way that like I feel like the show doesn't do enough for people. But it doing it for gods is still like a step forward of like, you the way you have behaved has constructed this world such that I got victimized, and that's your fault, and standing up for that is, I think, an important thing.
And I guess, yeah, and I guess there's part of me that actually wants Elliot to have that conversation with Quentin.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think more people need to, I want to see, I want to see Julia yell at Dean Fogg. I want to see, I want to see these people kind of get.
I mean, not as brutal a version, but like, I still feel like there's a chance we're leading to that conversation between Elliot and Quentin. I actually do. I think
we'll see.
But I guess with Julia, it's just that also like, that's part of the reason I guess the shade thing didn't bother me though, because at the same time she's like, you fucked up, Persephone, and they basically proved that Persephone was the one in charge of all these shades. So there's also part of me, it's kind of annoying. At the same time, if Persephone hadn't given it back to her, I'd been like, this is ridiculous. There's literally no reason for Persephone not to give it back. They would have to have had Persephone exist more and like express further how gods suck and like just don't do things that make sense. But without that, it's kind of like, I was kind of like, they got in and bothered me. But at the same time, I am kind of like, I mean, but like, there's no reason Persephone wouldn't give her a shade back. Persephone is in complete control of all the shades.
No, from that perspective, it made total sense.
And like, and Julia told her she fucked up, and Persephone agreed, and then Julia showed mercy to her son. And so like, yeah, like, so on that level, it's like it had to happen. So that's why I don't know entirely how to act about this moment, because like so much of it made sense, but some of which was a problem, and it was weird. I mean, that kind of also, I guess, explains like my thinking of this episode, which like I liked it, but like I should have liked it more. But like there's just so many weird things that like affected it. I mean, it was still good. It reinforced again, because one of the best episodes of, actually, I think the best episode of last season was its penultimate episode. That or the haunted house, whichever one. But
I think the best episode of last season was either the penultimate one or it was the last one, like not including the cliffhanger. Purely because like it took a step into like Quentin's experiences that in a way that it hadn't done before, and it hasn't really done since. And I wish it would.
Yeah, a little bit. I think I like the penultimate one best because it did a little bit more of dealing with that, and Quentin had that conversation and the conversations they had about things, and Quentin had some of that conversation with Alice in that episode. And
well, I will say that like this part of the season is when it makes sense for a show to be as like manic and plot heavy as the show always is.
Right, and that probably helps it.
Part of the reason
it's like, now that it's okay, it's like they hit in. But I'm just saying, like, it is interesting. I rarely say penultimate episodes of seasons or best episodes of seasons, because they usually are not, because they're weird episodes. And for some reason, the Magicians just is really good at them.
Yeah.
Because most shows are terrible with them, because they don't get to do most of the time what they have to do is set up the real main's plot line, but not actually to do anything fun. And the Magician, because it's so manic, gets to close plot lines off. And by closing off said plot lines, answer things, and then still set up bigger stuff. I think that's kind of like the one time its style pays off, is you get to do stuff with penultimate episodes you don't normally get to do with other shows.
Yeah.
But I think we're good. We're one more episode left, and then Josh is free. And I
mean, I could go on a rant about how the show's like treatment of Reynard here like relates to how poorly they deal with sexual assault in general. But instead, we'll just let the episode be over.
Please don't. Just no. Thanks for listening. We have to go now.
That's it for the Station Podcast.
Oh, well, no, I was more of the Salmon Roberts fucking.
Yeah, I know. It's fucking. Can you just go down there and tell them to be silent for 2 fucking minutes, because we actually are almost done.
It's pointless. I'm just gonna see if they'll shut up in a second. Okay. Thanks for listening. That's it for this edition of the podcast.
No, the other way around.
That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks for listening. Now I'm just trying to think of the thing. Hold on, let me just do it one more time. That's it for this edition of the podcast. Thanks for listening. All right, now the joke. Maybe about the drugs.
The drugs are like,
thanks for listening. Thanks for listening. We now have to convince the Kraken that Hakuna Matata is a terrible way to live.
Sure.
Okay. We have to go now. The Kraken has decided to... Hold on. We have to go now. The Kraken has decided to live by the ways of Hakuna Matata, and we need to explain that's a bad idea.
Cool. And broadcast over.
Oh, hopefully that won't be too terrible.
It probably won't be too bad. There's only a couple points where that was like really bad in my ears. But yes, it's very annoying.
Hakuna Matata.
I will say that like before I saw this episode, I was like, there's no fucking way I'm like watching this show again. And then I saw this episode and was like, maybe. So
I still find, as I said, I've definitely not hit that point. I still think it works. But, you know, yeah. Who knows, man? This is all like levels of clusterfuck. Who's to say?
We don't need more plot. Let's just throw all of book 3 in there and book 2. It's all going to come to a climax simultaneously.
Yes.
It'll be exciting next season when Fillory is falling apart, unlike this season when Fillory was falling apart.
I mean, to be fair, that kind of happens in the books too. To be fair, it's just much more of a big deal. Fillory falling apart. I want to be honest. That's why I tried to make the differentiation. In 2, when it's like Fillory is falling apart, it's like more like everything feels weird. Whereas 3, it's like just Fillory is falling apart.
Yeah.
But they did combine this because they put the Ember and Umber stuff with the other stuff. It looks like, and so
maybe just like book 3, they'll finally give Janet / Margot like a plot line to go do.
No, I mean, yeah, that'd be nice. I actually think that I do think they may have just. It does. I feel like they just swapped, and basically they made the whole Fillory, Ember, and Umber thing, which was effectively the book 3 conflict.
Yeah.
The season 2 conflict, and then they're in their mind the season. Oh crap! This was 12. Well, you just got another 11.
Did you name it anything different? Because is that gonna like rewrite it or what?
I have no idea.
Great. Robertson.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm 5 into Legion now, so I have 3 more.
It's weird. Why isn't it doing something different?
I don't know. What did you do?
Maybe because they're different sizes?
I don't know. This is Magician's 11 from the 9th, so your new one hasn't come in yet.
Well, it's uploading.
Yeah.
That's good. 5. Let's see here. What episode was 5?
The end of the episode, they're in his childhood home, and it's silent because they just discovered that like the parasite is taking control. Benny / Lenny / the dog / whatever / the man with the yellow eyes / the world's angriest boy in the world is all like some kind of like ancient mutant asshole demon.
Wait, that happens in a 5?
Yes. The end of 5 is he goes and rescues his sister and like murders everybody, and then they get there and they're like, "Oh shit!"
Oh no! I remember now. They said the parasite, and they said this right. And then isn't the end of the episode that they don't have that confrontation in the episode.
The end of the episode, the girl gets zapped and then she's back in the mental hospital and Lenny is like, let's talk.
No, that's what I wanted to make.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Then this makes 6 is basically going to be entirely in the mental hospital.
Yeah, I figured it'd be something like that.
And then 7 is when they're going. 7 is the episode going to be more properly explained.
They do, by the way. They explained when we saw her powers work again. They explained how it works, which is You're wrong about the time shift because the sister mentioned that he did stay with her a few days after leaving the asylum, like we saw. So there was no time jumping in that pilot. What happens is when the girl uses her power, when they touch, they swap minds, and when it wears off, they do swap bodies across time and space, or across space anyway.
They do no. That's not what happens.
That's literally what happens on screen when she swaps with the creepy guy who works for D3.
No.
Yeah, she touches the guy. So she's in the bedroom
Their bodies
upstairs.
do not swap.
What?
Their bodies don't swap.
Yes, they do. So here's what happens. So when she touches the guy, and their minds swap, their bodies do not change positions. But the creepy guy turns around and it's the girl in him, and she's like, it's
that's
me.
not their bodies. Once again, that's not their body swapping. That is the show's way of showing who is actually speaking through said bodies.
I'm saying that's their mind. Their mind is. I'm saying their bodies don't move when they touch. They're just their minds. But when she swaps back, their bodies change. Their bodies, their physical positions of where those characters are change.
That's not a that's not a literal representation. That's their minds flipping back. I know what you're saying. What you're saying is because it shows the version of like them holding and swapping.
I don't know how you can tell me that the show never breaks that literal that metaphor. So I don't know how you can tell me that that's not literal. There's no sign in the show that that's a metaphor because it never doesn't do that.
I can tell you it's not a metaphor because I can tell you it isn't purely from the fact of like when he goes with them with her, and they swap back. The whole point of that is like they noticed her. Is that the whole point is that when they swap back and she's there, it's that she's there and a different person. There's never a point where they think they have. There's never a point where they think they have David, literally David, in the car.
Yes, there is. They showed that. They showed the scene.
They
flash back to it where she's in between there. She's in the car in between two dudes.
They think they have. They thought it was him. What they thought was they had the mutant who acts that way. The whole point when they switch back is now she's back. It is not literal. It is a fucking It is a fucking just device they use to be like this. You don't think
that they went after David, that they knew that what he looked like or that he was a man?
They didn't know that. All they knew when they say they got the spike of power. They didn't know who it was when they went after it. They just knew the spike of power.
But it doesn't. I agree that the pilot is ambiguous, which is why it was confusing. But I don't think that the second time that she does it is ambiguous at all. I think it's very clear on screen. That's what's happening.
They don't physically swap. They just become.
Why not? What about the show indicates to you that they don't?
If they don't physically
uploading.
Yeah.
Okay, then it's fucking up because it's not downloading to me because can you change the name?
I don't know. I mean, I can if I can change it and we'll do it. We'll like fuck with the.
It should go if you have 2 Magicians 11 in your folder, then changing the correct one to 12 should pop it into mine. If this is at all working.
I mean, what it looked like was they were just saying it was a copy. They named it a new thing and said it was copy.
It should be right. It's Magicians 11 copy. Then why isn't it downloading to me?
I don't know. Well, I changed it to 12. I don't know if that will do anything though. She doesn't switch play. Who? I guess we'll use this example. Who are you saying is supposed to be in a place when this is happening?
Which time? The pilot or the?
Because for example, the physical space don't switch for one thing. Because like for example, when she talks about what happens to her mother, and they swap, the whole point is that it comes to and her mother is in the shower having sex with her boyfriend, having no recollection of what the fuck happened, and just starts screaming.
Right, which indicates so she touches her mother and their minds swap. So she's now in her mother's mind. She's now in her mother's body, and her mother is in her body. She walks into the other room and starts having sex with a boyfriend. Then their bodies swap, and so her mother is having sex with the guy, and she's in the other room. Her mind goes with her when the bodies swap, but the bodies are physically teleported.
The mother's body was already having sex with the dude.
No, it wasn't. That's not how she described
it. Yes, it was.
I'm gonna fucking look this up. I'm gonna find
the way she described it. She walks in as her mother. And the mother starts having sex with, and she has the sex in her mother's body. That was the whole point.
Where is this scene? They're in the sex room. Let me see.
What are you trying to suggest that the mother this doesn't even make sense to me. Are you trying to suggest that that she switched over? Are you trying to suggest that she switched into the mother's body? The mother went in thinking she was going to have sex with him, except it was actually, that doesn't make any sense. She wanted to experience having sex in her mind, so she switched into her mother's body.
Let me go back and look at 4, because 4 is where we see it happen. And 4 was what convinced me that this is how this happens. Okay, hold on.
Just so we're also clear, if for some reason you are right, that actually literally makes no sense, and that power doesn't work. It doesn't work on any level. So if he made that decision, that is so profoundly the wrong way of doing it, I can't even express it.
Okay, so let's see. So they touch. Here's the explosion. I'm gonna turn this down. Okay. So what we see literally is they touch. There's like a flash of light.
This says it's uploaded, by the way.
We see it's not here. I don't know why. But oh wait, now does it go now? It says something is loading, so we'll see. Okay, so there's a flash of light. So they're staring at each other. Her eye turns into his eye, and his eye turns into her eye. The flash happens. They're in the same positions. They have not switched places, so the bodies are exactly the same. The girl's body falls to the ground, and the guy is standing there in the same physical position in the room.
Yeah.
Okay, so their minds have swapped, but their bodies have not changed places. And then
that's why he starts freaking the fuck out, because it's her and she's like, what the fuck is going on? And she starts screaming.
This is so you're right. So they're it's confirmed when they both talk to the grunts. And then let's see, later on in the car. Okay, so he makes the car crash. The dude is the girl in the dude's body is driving the car. The dude in the girl's body is in the back of the car. David frees her. She takes the knife. She stabs David. Or she tries to stab David, but the girl in the dude's body throws a hammer at her and knocks the knife out of her hands. The girl runs. The guy is like, no. Girl is running down the road. The guy is chasing after her. And David chasing after the guy. David tackles the guy. The girl turns to look at him, the girl's body. The guy on the ground that has been tackled says, David, it's me. Which, by the way, they definitely need like a code word that's like, it's me.
Yeah, that's true.
And David looks down in confusion, and suddenly the girl is the girl's body again.
It's not literal.
So you think it's a mental illusion that everybody else is seeing?
No, I think that the I think that
what do you think is actually happening? Because what I see on screen is the girl was down the road. Now the girl is the creepy dude again, and he's pointing a gun at them from down the road.
I have to watch this one again.
Because they're literally in two different places, and then they swap, and they're in the same places but different bodies, and their minds are back to normal.
I had said when he looked down, the whole point was supposed to be that. I guess he starts. It doesn't make any fucking sense though. Like it literally makes no sense. Like your version actually makes less sense than my version. This is why I'm saying if the show made this decision, then that's so profoundly stupid because it was so unnecessary.
I mean, the only thing I can think of is that it's an illusion because what David like tackles the guy, and then it seems like she's like the audio fades into her from the guy's voice into her voice as he's looking down. That's the only thing I can think of is that like, but it just I don't know. It's so strange.
They can hear in the. I'll have to watch that scene again. The
end of 4, so
yeah. I had always, like I said, the way it always worked is it worked if you do it just they were doing a mental projection because that explains the first episode.
Yeah,
because they say flat out like they thought she was hit. They thought she was who they were. They thought because at the time David's mind was in her body, so they felt the mental power from her as weirdly. It's like a weird thing.
But I think it's literally that she changed into another person in the car while they were looking at her. Because that scene exists. It's a flashback to that moment.
I said that scene to me had just been them all of a sudden realizing it. But that doesn't make any sense because David at no point because David's body never leaves the asylum.
Yes, it does. They go and get him. So she
when they're first getting the person they go to get is her. That is who they get. They think they're getting her. The doctor thinks it is her, and they leave.
They pick up a person who looks like David, and then David becomes her. So what they have done is David and her. What is her fucking name? Amy?
Something like that. I don't remember.
Let's say it's Amy. So David and Amy swap when they kiss. Amy and David's body stays behind. David and Amy's body leaves because he's in Amy's body. The Melanie Bird and her two henchmen come to the asylum, pick up Amy and David's body, and then Amy and David's body swaps back, so it's Amy.
No, they're picking up Amy because that doesn't make sense. They would never let David. David's not allowed to leave until like later. Like
they came and got the David body when like the asylum was like fucked up because he'd like flashed and murdered everybody.
The only thing that would make sense is here's what's possible. It is possible you're correct, and there actually still is a time jump. But what actually happens is the time jump happens in an opposite direction, which is that I thought it was that the time jump was going like explaining in one direction. It actually went in the other, which is they came and picked up David, and then she switched back, and they came and picked up David who had left, and when they switched back, then that's how he got out in the first place. But then she was supposed to always be allowed to get out. They just let her out again. That is possible, which means a time jump still had to have happened.
I don't think there's a time jump because the sister says that David stayed with her right after he left the asylum. I don't think he left the asylum. I don't think Amy left the asylum later. We see her leaving. It doesn't make any fucking sense for there to be a time jump in there. There's nothing in the show.
No, I mean the timing of it has to have changed because my point was that the only way yours work is if my point was supposed to be that it looked like David just got out. The way it seemed to sound was that David just got out later because of stuff. Now, the argument you can make is David never would have been allowed to leave because of all that had happened. And so it was just that he switched out. But then, because my point was, I guess, more of was that the way it always looked to me was that David's body never got to leave. And then District 9 showed up, whatever the fuck they're called. D3 showed up, and they immediately interrogated him after the incident. And there was never a point at which, or something like that, or they picked him up. They pick him up
later. So there's.
If they pick him up later, then like I said, what had to have happened was that.
No, he's leaving in the first episode. He leaves the asylum as Amy, and then sees, and he talks about this memory in the interrogation. He thinks he sees the interrogator, but it's actually Melanie. Melanie and her goons are getting out of the car in front of the asylum, and what they do is pass him by because he looks like Amy, and then off screen walk into the asylum and get David. Meanwhile, he goes and has, you know, tea and like figures out what the fuck is going on, swaps back bodies, and then notices that he's being followed and he's running away because they have already found, and he's being followed by those henchmen again. They have found the David body, and then it turns back into Amy, and they go, oh, we're still looking for David, and that's when they come back after him. So after the swap happens, which happens simultaneously, her in the car and him at the restaurant, then he's on the run and they come after him. And it's contiguous. There's no time jump in there.
Well, there's a time jump in that when the time jump I meant was that the timing of when he goes to the timing of when he goes to see his sister is not the exact same timing as the flow of when the episode was going.
I think it is. I think there's no indication that it's not, and some indications that it is. Anyway,
I think there's indication that there's not. I mean, you may be correct. I guess that point is that version of that power literally makes no sense, and Noah Hawley's a moron in this one instance because that literally there's it's
a crazy nonsense power that she should be like fucking abusing because that's teleportation.
That is such a nonsense power then that like there's nothing to justify that. There's literally no way to justify that she has the ability to both change minds and reconfigure matter. Yes, that is an absurd power on every level that has like no reference whatsoever point. You know, I think that was the reason I was like, oh, and to me, it always fit with the idea that they were just doing a mental device of they want to help you see who is who.
No, I think you're like vacuum inducting in this one.
No, I'm not vacuum inducting. The point, no, I actually argue my interpretation works perfectly for the first episode. It may work less perfectly for the fourth episode is the one in which it's weird.
I don't see how you can watch the fourth episode, and you should go back and watch it so we can talk about it. I don't see how you can watch it and not understand.
I'm thinking back to this now and going, oh, you may be right. Yeah. I'm just saying I could totally defend this based on the first episode and her original discussion with him about what happened with the mother.
Yeah.
Because assumption, because the way that made sense to me was that like the mother's body was having sex, and then suddenly her mind came back.
I was going to go find that moment.
Her mind was going to go back into it, and suddenly like this, because it said the mother was screaming as opposed to like, you know, it doesn't make any like that makes sense in terms of what happened.
I thought she was screaming because she discovered her daughter having sex with her boyfriend.
The way, like I said, it is possible now that is way. The way I had heard the way they said this was that she was screaming, because to me it had been like, oh, because the way she just said it was like her mother was screaming. Like she's like, and then my mother's screaming. And so like, yes, both versions work because you're right. Because it could be that then my mother's screaming and yada, yada.
Yeah.
Of course, my other problem with this is I'm like, but wait a second. Is there a refractory period with your power then? Because as soon as you swap back bodies with your mother, wouldn't you then immediately swap bodies with the boyfriend?
There must be a refractory. Yeah, I thought of that too. There must be some kind of like, refractory.
You're correct. There's enough evidence to prove you're correct. No, my point now though is that power literally makes no sense now. Whereas my version of the power makes perfect sense.
No, that power is super OP.
Like my version of the power made perfect sense. It's like, oh yeah, everything's swapped, and then she swaps back, and then as a device, because you're trying to get away from instead of making actors have to act out, instead of constantly, you made the mental decision instead of having actors constantly act as other people, you're just going to like show people in other people's bodies, and because to me, there's definitely points in which that also seems to happen.
Yeah.
Like there definitely seems to be points in which she is talking from a position, and like the show is both doing both then, where sometimes they want to remind you who's actually in whose body, and at other points though they want to remind you like who is where. But you are correct. The running one is the one that doesn't make sense otherwise, because David's clearly holding the fucking dude.
Wait, here it is. I have the scene. Hold on.
Look, we're doing this wrong. This is the wrong way of answering this question. I need to know I need to know her actual name.
Her actual name is Sydney.
Noah Hawley, tell me how her power fucking works. This is how we're going to answer this goddamn question.
Listen, death of the author. We can only learn this by studying this show.
Rachel Keller, best known for her season. She was in Fargo.
I'm passed out on the couch. I heard him in the bathroom taking a shower, so I touched her hand.
Now they're considering this.
And then I was her. We went into the bathroom.
Okay, that's not helpful. Holly's like, if she touches your skin, she trades place with you. Her mind goes in your body and the other way around. That doesn't help me, Noah Hawley.
Yeah, we need the switch back. Switch didn't last long then. And when he was inside me, I changed back. And then my mom was there, and everybody was screaming. So to me, it sounds like what she's describing is I am having sex with him in the shower, looking like my mother. I changed back so that he is now having sex with me at 16. And then she says, and then my mother was there, which says to me that like her mother like opened the bathroom door and came in to find them having sex, and then everybody was screaming.
Hold on. Give me a better explanation here. Literally makes no sense. Like, that matter reconfiguration makes fucking no sense at all. Of course, I've also always been like, I don't understand, Sydney. You clearly like sex and the texting. Part of me is also they've never done a good enough job of explaining to me how, like, now that she's with David, to me, I'm like, right. So now you guys change bodies, and then it's just this weird kinky thing where you both have sex, but as the other sex and it's happening. And
well, I think I thought about that, and I think the problem with that is that she still has like a psychological aversion to being touched.
No, I agree with you. The problem was as the season went along, they didn't do a good enough job of explaining. They didn't continue speaking about this. She says that, and that makes sense early on. But then later, when she does other versions of it, it's like unclear because she's also like, I want to be touched by you, though. It's a weird thing.
Yeah, it's true. She should have like reiterated that later.
Hold on.
Also, just time in I can't tell if they're on like overclocked Inception time when they're in the dream state, or if they're or if it's like real time. Like, are they having like micro sex where like it takes them a second, but they've had like
it's happening like I think it's just I think they can do things at the same time.
Okay. So they're just like walking around like having sex all day in their head.
I guess. I don't know. No, Holly, you're still not explaining this to me. I need someone to explain the switchback.
Hang on.
Useless. Division 1. Useless.